Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another Sabbath Insight. Of course, I am Chief Yuya, and I am the Chief Jegna of the ANU Nation and Head Minister of the ANU Life Global Ministries. So I'm going to jump right into it on this one. As you see, the title is What Goes Up? In my head, for some reason, I was about to say What's Going Down. Maybe I'm thinking of Coming to America, What's Going Down episode. That's my mama. But anyway, what goes up? I want to start with a little bit of myth busting, which I think is an important one because it's a pretty big myth that exists among those who maybe identify as religious, identify themselves as churchgoers, Christians, so forth and so on. And it sort of gets perpetuated to a degree. And that's the Christian rapture. You know, that doctrine is not an ancient doctrine. It's not even Torah. It's not even what we would call first century teaching. It actually came about around the 19th century from a person by the name of John Nelson Darby, and it went from Darby, and it later spread to the Schofield Bible, and then you had Hollywood movies like Left Behind and whatnot. So the scripture most people will run to when they speak about the rapture, they'll speak about 1 Corinthians 15:52, where it speaks about in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, and the last trump will sound, and the dead shall be raised up, incorruptible, and we shall be changed, right? So people have, of course, created whole movies off what this individual Paul wrote, and you know his writings weren't necessarily always genuine, one, but I won't even get into that right now. But let's just, if we were to take it on face value and really break it down without the inclusion of Hollywood and without the inclusion of people making up stuff, what Paul is saying, if we could slow it down a little bit and maybe take the opportunity to unpack it. He's not talking about this like some secret escape before all the trouble comes, right? He's teaching about the resurrection of the dead. So when he says at the last trump, that's the seventh trumpet that you hear about in Revelations. That's the final judgment. So it's not the beginning of the tribulation, but it's actually the climax of the tribulation. So it's a cosmic event, and it's a very public sort of event. So if you notice what happens, what's being said, the dead are raised incorruptible. This is important. Now, I know some of you who may not care anything about the Christian perspective, the Bible perspective. Don't tune out. Don't tune out. Trust me. Not only is this important stuff to understand, because sometimes you do have to speak to granny or grandpa or auntie and set them straight a little bit. But set them straight beyond, it's a white man's book. Like, you got to go a little deeper than that, because it's not a white man's book. It's not white man's information. It may have been remixed, chopped, and screwed by European males, but it's not their text. It's not their philosophy. It's not their ideology. It's not their ancestral history. I mean, some of their history is in it, but they are not the primary actors and the main focal points, or even the chosen people that are outlined in the book. So just follow along. Trust me, you're going to appreciate the fact that you did. All right. So this is not for those who know, I'm not a Christian. So this is not a Christian tale, but I'm taking you through a school of thought. But again, when you look at that scripture, you kind of notice what happens. The dead are raised incorruptible. That's the point. And the living are changed. So that means resurrection. And it also means transformation. So mortality is taking on immortality. So it's not about necessarily leaving the earth. It's about changing the very state of being that one would have. So now if you compare sort of the two ideas side by side, as far as what your general Christian rapture teaching, what it sort of says is it believes that or it says that believers will vanish before there's a tribulation. But the scripture says at the last trumpet, all shall see it. The dead are raised, the living are changed. So the rapture teacher's teaching says the righteous leave and the wicked are left behind. But the actual scripture says in Noah's day, it was the wicked who were taken and the righteous remain. And you can back that up with Matthew 24, 37, Matthew 24, well, let's say 24, 37 through 30 through 39. So rapture teaching says we escape earth and we go to heaven. But the actual scripture says that New Jerusalem comes down to earth. That's in the 21st chapter of Revelation. So it's around like the first or second verse, right? So when Paul says we're going to be changed, he's revealing the mystery of resurrection, not escape. See, the raising of the righteous is about transformation and readiness for the kingdom. It's not about avoiding the work of endurance or dodging tribulation like you often see. I mean, Left Behind is just one movie, and it's an older one at this point, but there's a lot of them that shows this like people vanishing and then now times get hard. You know, what goes up is not the body fleeing the trouble of the earth. What goes up is the vibration of the righteous being lifted, purified, and clothed in incorruption. So now the kingdom of Elohim can be established here. All right. Now, I want you to understand that it's a very important thing, and it's much different than what many were taught. The modern idea of the rapture is that believers are vanishing into the sky before tribulation. And that doesn't come from Torah. It doesn't even come from early church doctrine, we could even say. But it's the 1830 teachings of, like I said, John Nelson Darby, and it was later popularized by the Scofield Reference Bible. So it's a 19th century invention. It's not ancient prophecy. The scripture never even uses the word rapture. It's the Greek word hapazo. And you'll find that in like First Thessalonians, Theologians, the 4th chapter, with Paul's message was about, he says, being caught up. But it was about resurrection and meeting the Messiah at his return, not some kind of like secret evacuation, right? So Yahushua even said, like I said, in the 24th chapter of Matthew, that his coming will be like the days of Noah. So again, looking at that story, who was taken away in that story? It was the wicked. The righteous are the ones who remain. So that flips the modern rapture story basically upside down. You know, it's another example. You've heard me say many times over the years, dating back a long time ago. When you're unsure, just do the opposite of what this society tells you to do, and you'll probably be close to the truth. You'll be pretty much truth adjacent at that point, or you'll be right on the money. The rapture story is a story, but the truth is it's based on what even their book is saying. It's the opposite of what's projected and promoted to you. Like I said, when you read Revelations 21, it doesn't speak of believers fleeing the earth, but of a heaven or a Shemayim descending. So where it says the new Jerusalem, a new Jerusalem coming down, the kingdom is established here, not in some distant sky pleasure resort, if you will. So the so-called like rapture doctrine is it creates this sort of, and it purposely, it creates this dangerous passivity in people, you know, and these are people who are waiting to be rescued rather than doing the work of preparing their vessel, right? What is the vessel? The vessel is the body, mind, and spirit. And you should be preparing your vessel for ascension, right? So when we talk about the concept of what goes up, it's not about a secret escape plan. It's about an earned rising. You're earning your way up. So you have resurrection, you have transformation, and you're aligning yourself with divine order. Now, this brings me, you know, you've heard me speak about the mother plane, of course, given to us by the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. And I want to really deal with some corrective sort of visions of ascension, what ascension is, what it looks like, you know, and go a little deeper in that. Like I said, the doctrine of the rapture, it's been handed to us, in modern times, and it tells you that one day the righteous are simply going to vanish. And I think, it's just me, a lot of folks who explore ATR or African traditional religions or just different paths of consciousness, um, it doesn't really stick. Like, I don't think in general people, even who are not deep in the church, are walking around saying, one day we're going to be caught up, or one day everyone's going to disappear. There's something about it where you kind of know it's BS. I think that's one of the one, and I could just be speaking for myself. So if I am, please pardon me. But, it's just one of those things that sometimes they say, or you hear Christians say, or you hear churches saying, you're like, nah, that one, it's not sticking, to tell you that one day all of the righteous people are simply just going to vanish. They're going to disappear into thin air, and they're going to leave the world behind, while the rest burn in chaos. That idea is not even scripturally sound. Like I said, that's an invention of the 1800s, and it's really lulled like millions of people into passivity. Because it basically says, don't worry about discipline, don't worry about judgment, don't worry about building righteous communities here. Just wait to be snatched away. You don't have to do any of that stuff. And that's not what Torah says. That's not what the Quran says. That's not what any of our indigenous systems teach. You know, Even when you look at Bereshit or Genesis 2:7, it says that man became a living spirit when the Elohim breathed into him the breath of life. And if you notice that he didn't rapture her, but he didn't rapture man into heaven. He breathed into him his own essence. The same thing when you look at Surah 15 in the Quran, I think it's 15:29, where he says, and he breathed into Adon of his spirit, and man became alive. So when you ask, like, the thing that's going up, the answer is not your flesh, it's not your body that's going up, it's not your church or your church membership. We all gonna go up. It's the breath, it's the spark, it's the ruah or the ruach, that divine light that was placed inside of you that ascends back to the source. And I could go much deeper into that, as far as the Ruach being that wisdom. You've heard me speak about that so many times, that we study all this stuff and we do all of this and we repair our character. Because you could do all the study you want and get as deep as you want, but if you still are selfish, if you still are angry, if you still are bitter, if you're still petty, if you're still deceitful, if you're still inconsiderate, if you're still disrespectful, the list goes on, then you don't make it. All of your study is for naught. So it is your character and your consciousness that is developed through the Ruach, or that divine breath, or that Imi, that makes it actually back to the source. See, that's where now you can pull into the teachings of the Nation of Islam, where they become corrective in a sense. The most honorable Elijah Muhammad taught of the mother plane. And, this was a massive wheel in the sky that also carried smaller crafts. And at the time when he shared, people laughed. They said it was fantasy. But if you think about what it represents, it's not escapism, but it represents accountability with elevation. So the mother plane becomes a symbol of divine judgment. It separates the righteous. It separates the wicked. It's a reminder that Yah's reckoning there's an order and an infrastructure. It's not just this haphazard, like, I don't know if I'll get caught up, or, it's not this like cosmic bus pass. It's orderly, it's deliberate, it's very measured, if you will. So what a rapture says, you're taking whether or not you've done the work. The mother plane says only what is prepared and what is aligned can rise. Okay, and I think that's an important thing, because that's not just a Nation of Islam idea. You see the same sort of imagery across different cultures. When you look at the Dogon people of Mali, and you speak of the Nomo, the celestial beings who descend and ascend in vessels of water and in vessels of light. The ship wasn't fleeing the earth, but it was about restoring balance and transmitting a higher knowledge, right? Then you look in ancient Kemet, right, or Tameri. The righteous sought entry into the boat of Ra, but to board that vessel, your heart had to be weighed against the feather of Ma'at, right? And if your heart was, or we'll say if your life was heavy with falsehood, then you didn't rise, you were devoured, right? So even in modern culture, we have Parliament Funkadelic, right? George Clinton, Parliament Funkadelic, the mothership connection. The same code appears, the mothership connection. It wasn't just about funk per se, it was about a ritual broadcast. I spoke about that in our last session. You know, it was a prophecy described as a I would say no, it was a prophecy disguised as a groove. You know, it was a ship that would land only for those whose vibration was right, whose rhythm was right, whose soul was on the one. So you have different systems, you have different languages, but you notice the message is the same. Ascension is earned, it's not assumed. So this is where you look at different aspects that can strengthen that point. You can't blaspheme the true name when you breathe. You know, like babies, when they come out into the world crying, you know, Yahuwah, right? They don't just cry, they cry ah, right? Which is really the sound of Allah. You know, the first breath that they take, it testifies. So the cry becomes a code. So when you exhale, you repeat the same thing. The breath itself is a witness, because what the Almighty placed inside of you, it can't be erased. So that original breath that was put in you, or that what I'm calling also the divine spark, is not something that can be covered. You know, because as soon as the baby comes out, it's ah, you know, whether it's crying or whether it's in relief, you'll hear the baby say the name of Allah or Yahuwah, Ahuwah. You'll hear that a lot. You know, it's constantly projecting that spark, that divine breath right out. So when the call comes in terms of what goes up, you have to look at it. Really dismantles the myth of the rapture, because the rapture makes you very passive. You know, it tells you to wait on the sky, you know. But the truth or the reality is the sky has already been placed inside of you. So the breath that you carry is the actual vehicle for your ascension. The light that was breathed into you is the actual mothership. You know, if you think about it or look at it like this, the false rapture tells you you'll be saved from tribulation without trial, right? But every other sacred system in the world tells you that the trial comes first. You know, in ancient Kemet, the weighing of the heart. In the Quran, it's the test of obedience. In the Torah, it's the refining fire that it speaks about. Even in the nation of Islam, you have the judgment of the plane. So the real question should be, will I be raptured? Well, or shouldn't be, will I be raptured? The real question is, will the spark inside of me still be lit when the call comes? Because only what is aligned, only what is refined, only what has been purified about you is a thing that's going to go up, is a thing that's going to ascend. So the correction, I would say, is in that refinement. It's not escapism. It's not fantasy. It's a return. So the breath returns to the one who gave it to us. The light returns to the source of light. You know, so I would say, don't let anyone tell you, like sell you this sort of ticket of the sky. The ship is already here, right? When we talk about swing low, sweet chariot, and let me ride, beautiful song by Parliament, or the Funkadelics. But the ship is already here. The ship is your breath. It's your alignment. It's the chariot is your preparation. The mother plane, or what we also could call the celestial boat or the mothership, all of these are reminders of what's already inside of you that you have to work now. So the rapture asks you a question like, will you be taken? The truth asks you, will your spirit rise? very distinct, and only what's prepared, like I said, only what's purified, only what the Most High's breath uh, that's within you, only that is the thing that will go up. The parts that have the breath or that are personifying and typifying what that breath is. So the chariot, or even the Merkaba that we speak about oftentimes, it's an inner chariot. Your astral ascension comes from the internal chariot, right? So if we keep climbing, let's say we've sort of looked at the myth of the rapture. I think I've highlighted that. We've seen how the mother plane or the boat of Ra or even the nomos vessel of light, it corrects those ideas. But now let's look at the internal. The interior is always so important, because the true ship, like I said, the true plane, the true chariot is actually you. You are the chariot. When you look at what the prophet Ezekiel saw, he spoke about the vision of the wheels within the wheels, the spinning in the sky, fire, lightning, and he even said living beings moved inside of them. For centuries, people were saying, "Oh, were those angels? Were they spacecrafts? Was it symbolic?" Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad pointed to that actual text when he spoke about the mother plane. But the deeper truth is that Ezekiel's vision is also a mirror of your inner design, the way you're created, right? Your body is a chariot. So your energy centers within your body are the wills. So the same way the mother plane was described with smaller wills inside of it, your spinal column is the great will, right? Wheel. I know sometimes I pronounce those words a little weird. Will. Your spinal column is the great will, and the chakras are what other cultures may call Sephiroth, or some other cultures may call them Orisha, or doors of the Orisha, or power centers, but those are the smaller crafts or the smaller wills. So when our ancestors spoke of spiritual, or more so, I'll say astral ascension, they weren't talking about a ghost leaving your body to float up into the clouds. They were describing a process, the breath, the spark of life, or, moving upward through the chambers of the body. So as it moves upward, it activates each gate until it meets the crown, right? So in the Vedic tradition, we call it the Kundalini rising, right? The coiled serpent. And that coiled serpent, it lives at the base of the spine and it ascends up through the chakras. But it's the same story in your Kabbalistic form, where you have the tree of life, where energy rises from Malkut, or the kingdom, and it goes up to Keter, the crown. In Yoruba, or Isheshe, that Yoruba cosmology, we have the Ori Inu, which is the inner head, the inner destiny. And then we have the Ori Ode, which is the outer head. So in order for you to rise, you go from inner head to outer head. So again, different languages, different continents to a degree, but it's the same process. What goes up is the energy of the Most High that was breathed into you. So what's really important to understand is that ascension is not automatic. If the energy is blocked by deception, by indulgence, by rebellion against the divine order, it stagnates. So the serpent coil never rises. But when it's purified through truth, it's purified through discipline, through alignment, then the energy rises up and you are literally transfigured. So that's why when you read the book of Coming Forth by Day, it speaks of traveling through gates. And as you travel through each gate, you recite a different password. That's not a superstition. It was an initiation into the truth that the soul rises up will by will, or degree by degree, or gate by gate. And if you think about it, that's what Ezekiel saw, wills within wills, right? Energy moving like lightning, living creatures, winged, lifting upward. That's a cosmic sort of mirror of your own body's ascension. So when we talk about the rapture, I want you to really understand this. The escape plan was never out there. When I say out there, like outside of you, the chariot is in here. So the question is not, will a ship beam me up? The question is, have I activated the ship inside of me? Because the Kundalini rises, the tree of life climbs, the Ori aligns, and the breath, the spark, the light, it's all there. But what is the vehicle? What goes up? Only what's aligned, only what's prepared, and only what has traveled the wheels and been lifted up by the inner chariot. So that's why when Yahweh Shai said the kingdom is within you, you also have in the Quran when it says he breathed his spirit into you, right? So this is why every culture, like, from again, Tameri to Mali, to Israel, to India, speaks of a serpent. They speak of a tree. They speak of a chariot. They speak of a plane. Different names, same truth. Ascension, not escape. Ascension is a return. So you have to sort of check your wills. You got to check your own gates. You got to check your breath, because that chariot is like waiting to launch inside of you. And when the call comes, only the parts of you that have risen, only the parts of you that have aligned with divine order, only the part that's light enough, bright enough goes up. Like most people read it like it's a mythology, or I would say even worse, a superstition. But what it really is a manual of ascension that speaks of the soul moving through 42 gates, 42 judges, multiple chambers. And at each gate, the soul must speak a word. The soul must speak a declaration or a password. And that's not because in the duat or the afterlife, there are bouncers at each door. They don't have bouncers, but it's because each gate represents a degree of consciousness. So every declaration was a test of alignment. When you said, I have not lied, I have not murdered, I have not stolen, right? These 42 negative confessions or declarations, it wasn't a moral checklist as many people see it. It was a calibration. Each time you said something, you came into a different calibration. So each truth and spoken it, I would say it made the heart lighter. So each declaration raised your vibration. Each gate was another wheel that was spinning, another level of ascension that you now unlocked, right? So if you kind of look at it like a staircase, your soul is not going to leap to the top at once. It's got to rise step by step, or will by will, degree by degree. And the passwords become the affirmations of alignment. So um, there's a proof there that the soul has mastered that degree and was worthy to move higher. So if you compare that to Ezekiel's visions, wheels within wheels, creatures ascending with lightning, that's the same sort of image, if you will, ascension through chambers, or one inside of the other, unfolding as the soul rises up. And you can compare it again to the Kundalini, the serpent passing through each chakra. At every center, there's a challenge, right? Whether it be pride, whether it be lust, whether it be fear, you have to face each gate. And if you master it, the serpent rises higher. If you fail, the energy falls back down, right? So when you read the book of Coming Forth by Day, or some people say the Book of the Dead, it's not about some sort of primitive sort of ideation. It was an initiation. It's telling us your ascension is not random. It's a sequential experience. It's discipline. So this is why when Yahweh Shai said, in my father's house, there are many mansions, right? Mansions are chambers. Mansions are gates. He was speaking the same exact code. In Revelation, it speaks of the overcomers receiving a white stone. with a new name. Again, that's some sort of like password imagery. Another gate has been passed through. So when you hear about gates and you hear about passwords, I want you to understand it's not about superstition. It's not about sort of just base mythology, but it's about qualification. It's about the soul being refined at each level it goes through until it's light enough, it's truthful enough, it's pure enough to continue upwards. Um, that's why I said, like in the title, what goes up? Not just anything goes up, not just anyone goes up. Only what has passed through the gates, only what has spoken the passwords, proven itself aligned. That's what goes up. When you look at the Timerian or the Kemetic concept of a gate, you have the Kemetic gate, you have the Kundalini chakras, you have the Kabbalistic Sephirah, and then you have the Yoruba principle, right? So let's look at a couple of examples. I'm gonna line them up real quick. Um, I have not lied, right? I have not lied with a lie. If we were to go from the Kemetic to the Vedic, I have not lied would line us up with the Muladhara, or what we call the root chakra. That's the survival, because now we're talking truth versus fear, right? That would be in Kabbalistic, that would be the Malkut, or the kingdom, which is the foundation of reality. Or in the Yoruba, it would be the Ori Ode, outer alignment with the earth. Then you have in your negative confessions, I have not stolen, right? So if you were to line that up with the Vedic system, that would be the Svadhisthana, right? Which we also call the sacral chakra. That's your integrity versus your lust. That's your desire. So in the Kabbalistic, that would be the foundation, or what we also say, Yesod. Yesod is generative power. Um, in our Isheshe, or in Yoruba, we'll just say Yoruba, that would be Iwa. Iwa's character. You have I have not killed, right? Again, that would take you, I would say, to Manipura. Manipura is what you may call the solar chakra, and that's the will. That's discipline. In Kabbalistic, that would be Hod, or Nedzak. Hod is glory, and Nedzak is victory, which is uh, mastery over your own impulses. Having that ability to emotionally regulate, to have some emotional maturity. That would be I have not killed. Um, and for those of us who are priest of Ogun, that was my first initiation before Ifa. But I worked as an Ogun priest for many, many, many years, and we have Ogun's iron law of order, right? So that would coincide with that. Then you have the negative confession. I have not been prideful. I have not been prideful. I would align that with anahata. Anahata is the heart chakra, right? That's humility, that's compassion, that's love. In the Kabbalistic, that would be Tiferet. Tiferet is the balance between judgment and mercy. Even though it's typically identified as beauty, it is that too, but it's the balancing point. If you look at it on a tree where it sits between judgment and mercy. And our Yoruba, that would be the Ori Inu, where it's the inner head, or the inner heart. You have the concept, I have not blasphemed, right? Um, I would align that with the Vishuddha. Vishuddha is your throat chakra, right? So that is truth in speech. Like I'm having blasphemed. I'm telling the truth. And our Kabbalistic systems, I would align that with Gevarah. Gevarah, as well as Chesed. Strength. Gevarah would be strength. Chesed would be mercy, right? So there's a sort of discipline in one's expression. In our Yoruba, I would align this with Ashe, right? Just like in the Tamarian, that would be the Makaru, the words of power. But the Ashe is I would connect that with that in terms of divine utterance. Then you have, as far as one of the negative confessions, I have not sown discord, right? I would align that with ajna. Ajna in our Vedic system is the third eye, or what you would call third eye. I typically call that the first eye, right? First eye chakra. But that's wisdom. That's your vision. In your Kabbalistic, that would be Bina and Chokma, understanding and wisdom. In Ifa, or in Yoruba, I would align that with Ifa, which would give you sight into destiny. That first eye, sight into destiny. You have the negative confession, I have not I have not polluted myself, right? That would align with the Sahasrara, right? That's your crown chakra, or the divine union is Sahasrara, divine union. That connects you to your Keter, to the crown, having union with the Most High. And in our Yoruba, that would be Orun. Orun is Shemaim, or heaven, is destiny. So if you look at that, like, that's only 7 gates, right? I just thought real quick, I'll just go through the major 7 chakras. You have more than 7 chakras, but you see how they can line up with each other if you just give it a little thought. But when you look at the book of Coming Forth by Day, just remember that there's 42 list of declarations. So that's because every possible distortion of truth had to be corrected. Every lie, every theft, every betrayal was a possible gate. So the pattern is the same. In ancient Tameri or Kemet, you declare the truth at each gate. In the Vedic system, the serpent passes through each chakra. In your Hebraic system, or your Moorish system, the soul climbs each Sephiroth rung by rung. In the Yoruba system, the Ori must align itself with cosmic law step by step. So in each system, it's the same reality. If you fail, you don't rise, right? You fall back. So only the what passed and goes through is the gates that have been active, or the wills that have been activated, the rungs that have been climbed and aligned. When your Ori is aligned, now we're not talking about superstition and hocus pocus. We're talking about spiritual mechanics. There's a technology. Um, there's a technology present. Like looking again at the book of Coming Forth by Day, right, which I spoke about. Again, many people call the Book of the Dead. And when you read Wallace Budge's book, he calls it the Book of the Dead. But to get clear, and looking at that, Ascension isn't just about this sort of like mystical travel. It's about preparation for dying. So the Kemetic sages didn't, like I said, call it the Book of the Dead. They called it the Book of Coming Forth by Day. And when you might ask, well, why? Like, what, because death to them was not the end, it was the rising, the coming forth into light. So they also knew, I would say, something that many of us try to ignore, that nobody rises by accident. You prepare for it. The text gives us the image of a soul entering judgment, and the heart is placed on the scales, and it's weighed against the feather of Ma'at, right? And if the heart is heavy with lies, it's devoured. If it's light, the soul passes through and comes forth by day, right? So the weighing, again, it's not about some superstition. I want you to kind of hold this image in your head. It's about metaphysics. The heart is the seat of your vibration. So when you lie, or when you betray someone, when you live outside of alignment, the heart grows heavy. But when you live inside of the truth, when you walk in Ma'at, when you purify your life, the heart grows lighter, right? So it's only what is light that can rise. It's the same message everywhere. You can't really escape it. In Torah, Moses told Yisrael, I set before you life and death. Choose life. It's not about breathing. It's about preparing your essence. In the Quran, if you read Surah 23, it says, successful indeed are believers, are the believers who guard their prayers and turn away from vain talk, who are humble. And you can say, well, why is that? Because these are the practices that make the spirit ready for return. You see, even in what they call the God spells, Yahweh Shai says, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see Elohim. You know, it's the same sort of principle there. If you look at it, purity is the password. So you can make it practical, like practical preparation. Number one, purification of the body. I always say start there, man. Get your body right. That's why in the Kemetic priesthood there's so much fasting. If you look at the yogis cleanse their nadis. The Hebraic tradition, look at the Levitical laws and eating clean, because the body's a vessel. If the vessel is toxic, the energy can't rise. I would say, two, purification of the mind, right? Every culture speaks of reflection, prayer, meditation. Uh, your ancient Hebrew ancestors spoke of binding the law upon your mind. Again, in our Yoruba, there's an emphasis on the Ori Anu, the inner head, as being the key to your destiny. Because if your mind is cluttered with a whole bunch of lies and falsehoods, you can't ascend like that. I would say also purification of the spirit. That is alignment with the divine. You know, again, it's not a church membership. I started going back to church, whatever. It's not lip service. It's real down home, hardcore alignment where there's truth telling, there's compassion, there's even handedness, there's community service, there's walking in Ma'at. You know, the book of Coming Forth by Day gave 42 declarations. I have not lied. I have not stolen. I have not murdered. And it wasn't about legalism. It was about vibration. So each phrase, each declaration is a different vibration, and each declaration then lightens the heart. Each act of truth telling raises the soul. So if you kind of look at it all together, the preparation for death or the preparation for ascension, for what goes up, it's not an afterthought. Like when I start getting old or I get sick, but rather it's a lifestyle. So if you think of it like this way, the rapture myth says, don't worry, you'll just be taken up. The truth says, live now in such a way that when your last breath comes, your soul already knows which way to go. It's not getting lost. You know, that's why when you read the Kemetic text, Coming Forth by Day, because the soul that has not been prepared, or rather it says the soul that has been prepared doesn't stumble in darkness, it walks in light. So I would say if your life is in disorder, your ascension will mirror that same disorder. If your life is in alignment, your heart is light, if your spirit is truthful, then when death comes, it's not a defeat. It's the opening of a gate. And that's why we prepare. That's why we cleanse. That's why we discipline. Because when the moment comes, the only what is ready is going to go up. I mean, there's no getting around that. As people, you can have all the church suits and church outfits you want. Like, a lot of what you've been taught is myth. And a lot of the myth you've been taught about ascension, about disappearing, about flying away. There's even songs about it. Hezekiah Walker has a song, I'll Fly Away, about skipping judgment. Those are distractions, man. They keep you from doing the one thing that matters. The truth is, what survives your death, what actually ascends up, it is your character and it is your consciousness. It's not your body. The body stays here. It's not your money. The money dissolves here. It's not your reputation. It's not your image. All of that dies inside of people's memories. The only cargo that makes the journey is the essence of who you became and the awareness that you cultivated. That's why you have the ancient Kemetic 42 declarations of innocence. They weren't superstitious sort of declarations. They were a record of character. This is a record. I have not stolen. I have not lied. I have not corrupted. Right? Those were not just laws. They were weights on the scale, that was being taken off. So every lie makes you heavy. Every truth makes you light. You see? And that's why Yahushua said, again, the pure in heart will see Elohim, because purity of the heart is character refined. When your heart is pure, it's because it's going through a refinement of character. In the Quran, it says only a sound heart comes before Allah, because consciousness that's been purified is the only passport across dimensions. You see, the rapture myth, it tells you your confession secures your future. Real initiates know that your character is the only ID that you can't fake at the gate. You could, I could fake you out, man. I can go into a church tomorrow, right? Tomorrow, Sunday, I could put a suit on. Well, some churches nowadays, you don't have to wear suits anymore, but whatever. I could look like everybody else, put on a bow tie and some glasses and some tight pants and some pink socks, like most church guys. I should say that's disrespectful, excuse me, like some church guys. And I know that world, so I'm not speaking from the outside. Those of you who know me, they know I spent a lot of time in that world. I didn't grow up in that world, but I was deeply entrenched. Anything you ever hear me say that I did, just know that I was deeply entrenched in it, because I that's just how my mind is. If I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna go all the way, But I can go in there and fake. I could say, I'm a minister, I'm from Ohio, or I'm from California somewhere, or Kansas City, and I'm just visiting, I'm passing through, and, I'm doing a revival up in such and such somewhere, and I just saw this church, I saw y'all were here, and the Spirit just pulled me in, and just maybe, I say all this during testimony, forsake not the assembling of thyself, and when two or three are gathered together and touching and agreeing, I will be in the midst. And I felt the energy and the power of God on high in this space, and it led me right into it. And I listened to my spirit. And I could fake it, and they'll be like, "Amen, amen." The drummer will start playing rolls, and the organ player will start hitting little riffs and stuff like that. If you know, they shouting. I'm not even a Christian. But I could fake it, right? But character you cannot fake. It's an identification that sits at each gate. It sits at each portal. It sits at each will, and you can't fake it. If your consciousness is low, if it's bound to lust, if it's bound to greed, if it's bound to violence, then that's the frequency that you'll rise into. So you don't magically transform even at your death. You just carry that same state with you. If your character is noble, if your mind has been sharpened, if your heart has been purified, then you rise into realms that match that vibration. That's why Ascension is not a rescue plan. It's a mirror. Death doesn't make you different. It shows you what you really are. You see? And there's a hard truth to sort of deal with and all that. Your titles, your rituals, your affiliations, they don't secure you. Your character does. Consciousness does. Because, and you might say, well, why? Because I know that's the part people don't like me talking about. Because that's the part that doesn't rot. That's the part that a worm can't get to and eat. That's the part that the grave can't even touch. It's just the same reason why when Paul said, man, flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom. He was onto something when he said that. It's because only what's eternal is the thing that's going to go up. And the eternal is not your flesh. It is your formed character and your expanded consciousness. That's the parts that go up. So I would like you to, next time you're going back and forth with your auntie or your granny or whoever, settle it once and for all. what goes up? Not your body, not your possessions, not your image. What goes up is your essence which is shaped by your choices, proven by your character, and illuminated by your consciousness. That's the spark that survives. That's the ship that rises. That's the only part of you that is fit for ascension. And if that part hasn't been developed, right, I guess that might be the question in the back of some of your minds. If you lived your life as a fool, if you carried hatred, if you rejected the truth, then you've already decided where you're going to go. Because ascension is not this lottery, it's a spiritual law. So you got to stop banking on myths. You got to stop waiting for ships. You got to stop waiting to vanish. You got to build your character. You got to elevate your consciousness. That's the only insurance policy that crosses dimensions. Because truth is, when your breath leaves you, when the gates open, when the wheel turns, when the trumpet sounds, only what you became is going to go up. You see, only what you became, what you put your hand to, what you worked at. That's just the way it goes. And, I'm just a messenger. I'm not, I didn't create these rules, but my job as an educator is to help you to understand them and to elucidate them and to give you information about what already exists. But as always, look up everything I said. If you're like, no, that's not true, we're going to be caught up in the sky in the twinkling of an eye, and we're going to fly through outer space to heaven, which exists somewhere or in another dimension. You might, but sometimes you got preachers that go that deep. Well, no, it's another dimension. Oh, okay, all right. That's not what it says. That's not what it says. The songs say that, and them courting movies say that. That's Hollywood told you that. There was you saw Nicolas Cage and he was flying a plane and then he fell asleep and he woke up and looked to the side and all you saw was the hat and the shirt and the pants there. Nobody was there. So everybody's flying up into heaven butt naked, because that would mean that their bodies are being caught up, not just their spirits. That doesn't make sense. You came from the dust and from the dust you shall return. You're physical. But it's the spark of life that has to be developed. That thing that sits at your root chakra at the beginning that needs to be ascended up to the crown. And that takes work. That takes work. That doesn't just happen because you change your screen name or you put on a bunch of cowrie shells or a bunch of bangles or you grow your hair natural or you start drinking and eating more healthily. That's part of it. Like I said, the purification of the temple, that's one gate. You got to keep going up to the gates. How many gates are there? That's the question you're going to ask. I don't know. Just keep going. You're going to know when you transition. Just keep going. Keep going. Any number that you receive and anything that you think you've done will only make you complacent. Well, I don't be lying. Let me check that off. I don't be polluting. Let me check that off. I haven't copulated with a small. Let me check that off. I'm not going to say it. I'll check this out. Okay, I'm good. So I could just relax for the rest of my life and pretty much wait until the end. No, don't get locked into a grid of numbers. Just get locked into the idea of the infinite and the infinite expansion, the infinite ascension, infinite development, infinite refinement. Ain't it a fun thing to do? I like it. And if you are of the spark cloth, you'll like it too. Those who are not of the spark, they hear this type of stuff like, oh, I got to do that too. Because some people are still learning how to walk. Literally. I like the people watch. Go to the park one day and watch. You'll see. Some people walk with a certain rhythm. It's just like a boom, boom, boom. Like when you look at Samuel Jackson walk, It's just like that's Samuel Jackson, right? Then you look at other people walking, it's like, or they're constantly tripping. I know someone like that. Every time he gets around me, he gets real clumsy when he's around me. And other people have noticed it too. He gets real awkward and real clumsy, and it's like, yeah, I guess that would happen when a real lion of the Most High comes into the room. The paper tigers, they start shaking. But with that said, I want to thank you all for tuning in. As always, be sure for those of you who are interested in joining this beautiful nation and going through this process of refinement, going through this process of cultivation. When you join ANU, some people, you've heard us talk about this before. They think I'm going to sit in the back and watch. Just a lot of times when they first come, because people are intimidated because of their ego. And everyone seems so smart. And I said, they're not. They're not. No. They may know phrases and terms that you don't know, and you can ask them, like, what does this mean? Why do y'all say that? Why do you say that? But everybody's working, or should be working at least, So there's no reason to be intimidated. There's no reason to feel like, or a common one, people say, well, I don't want to sound dumb. You got an ego problem. You have a serious, serious ego issue. If you count the amount of languages that I use, like if you go back to old podcasts or old videos, and if you could count the languages from English to Latin to Greek to Hebrew to Yoruba to Tree to Fanti to my Igbo is pretty bad. So I tend to stay away from Igbo. I try, but it don't be happening. From Spanish, from Zulu, from Medu. We could just can't. I don't be honestly. I don't remember the amount of languages I play with, but I pronounce things incorrectly all the time. All the time, in other languages, pronunciation is not my strong point. I break down oftentimes words better than native speakers. And they always tell me that, like, wow, I didn't know that word meant that. Yeah, I got that part. It's like I got the theory part, but my application is not that strong in all of these different languages. I'll speak and I can get people that if I speak Zulu, they'll understand me, but some words be like, what'd you just say? And then I'll say it again and be like, no, it's pronounced like this, that's common. That's common for me. I mispronounce stuff all the time. I say the words and I do the right breakdown, but jumping from language to language, sometimes that happens, right? So in that instance, maybe I sound dumb. Maybe I sound dumb when I'm doing that. No biggie. I welcome native speakers, and sometimes they do inbox me like, hey, I noticed you said this, it's pronounced this way, or, you were saying, somebody helped me with that before with something in Zulu I was saying, and I kept saying the singular form when I was speaking there's a singular and a plural form, but I just kept using a single form for everything I was saying. And he was like, yeah, you pronounced it right. It's the right word, but you just a little point of correction. Cool. Thank you. Like, yeah, so never feel that way. I mean, I can't tell you what to feel, but I hope you can be humble enough to understand that everyone has a first day on the job. And what's most important, more than protecting your ego, which doesn't take you to the ascension, but definitely can block you from the ascension. What's most important that you get with folks who are on the path, who are on the move, and who are growing and learning, who you can grow and learn alongside with, and you can help. It's not always about sitting back and listening, but do you have the heart and the compassion to help and to community build? And in a community like ANU, I can promise you there's always someone younger than you. Always. It just happens like that. There's always somebody who wants what you are. And what I mean by that, we have sisters in ANU who want big sisters. We have sisters in ANU who want little sisters. We have sisters in ANU who have mommy issues, and they want to understand mothering from a healthy space. We have sisters in ANU who still want to have daughters. I've only tapped the female part. I didn't even go to the men. We got men who need big brothers, who need little brothers, who need uncles, who need babas, who need dudes like me who are just always accessible. They can message me or whatever. Chief, I got a question. Or Chief, that this happened. Right? We all need something, right? So just think about it that way, as opposed to just always like, what am I getting? But know that you already bring something that's valuable. And you may not know much about the doctrine, or you may be like, man, I like what he's teaching. It's on point, but I'm not versed in it. Some people just need a hug. Maybe you make a dish that whenever someone eats it, it's just like they just feel at home or feel loved or feel welcome. Maybe it's the way you say peace, you know. Maybe it's the way you say greetings. Maybe it's the way you say shalom that a person needs, right? So don't discount those things. I'm learning new things every day, even in terms of how I show up to the community. And sometimes when I second guess the value of certain contributions, where I'll be like, I ain't doing that anymore. I'm tired of doing this. That's usually when the Most High will send a messenger my way. That's when I'll get a message or something like, I noticed you stopped doing this, or are you still coming out to the so-and-so? And it's like, oh, okay, keep doing that, you know? So that's just something to consider. Family and community, everyone and everything serves a purpose. Everyone doesn't have to be this deep, super scientific, lyrical miracle sort of scholar who can break down all of these ancient things. And like, hey, we don't need that. We need a few of those, but we need other stuff too. We need people who can, when we do retreats, sometimes the sisters need a break. We need sisters who know how to run a kitchen, no shade, but the last retreat, God, that kitchen looked like a mess. But it wasn't their fault. We got hit with this crazy rain and thunder and lightning storm. So everything, last retreat was almost like a survival challenge. We only had like really like one day, maybe 1 or 2 days of like moderate weather. Yeah, it was rough out there, but we were together. But you just, some brothers come through, they may not be as tight with everything, man, but they know how to fish, and they know how to, I always like to include different things when we meet for like retreats and stuff. And I love it when brothers come and they have outdoor skills, because that's my thing. I'm a naturist and I'm a survivalist. So when brothers come with that, now they may not be able to break everything down and everything like that, but they may be handy. So I'm just, I don't want to go off into that too much, but just understand that, I promise you, when you're called and when you're drawn in and attracted into a space like this, don't second guess your contribution. There is something that you're supposed to bring, even if you haven't totally aligned yourself with all of the principles as of yet, but you see them as valued and you're trying. Sometimes you need the community to help you get to that last little gate, or that next gate. I don't want to say last. You need a little bit of help there. And I'm going to throw this out there before I sign off. That goes for people also of various races. That's been a constant, and I knew where people have contacted me, and because they're not, I don't know if I would almost have to use that newer term, foundational Black American. They just feel like, well, maybe people wouldn't want me there. I've had that come from a Dominican sister. I've had that come from a real cool brother from Peru. Been working. These are people I've known for years, still work with. They still contact me. They WhatsApp me regularly, but it's like, but I'm afraid to join because, man, are you crazy? This is about spirit and spark. This isn't about, like I got one brother from Brazil. Like, I'm like, bro, like the majority of us were dropped off from Brazil. Like, you probably the most African, you probably be the most African one in the room, you know. But he's been rocking with me since about '09, 2009. He's been rocking with me since about '09. In fact, he was one of the main reasons that I started doing podcasts. Yeah, he was one of the main reasons I started to do podcasts, as opposed to just back then. I used to do like I would do classes in my space in the temple, and I would just record them, and then I would like email the recordings out, literally like just the MP3s. I didn't even think about doing a podcast, but it was like a podcast. But and my classes back then would be like we'd be there for like 5-6 hours, and I'd be breaking down everything, you know. And he got a hold of the MP3. I guess someone had forwarded it to him or whatever, and then we started building. And he was like, "Yeah, we have a whole class down here that we do every strong around your MP3s." And I was like, really? I was like, wow, and then it blossomed, and I was like, oh, okay, so I need to figure out a better medium to get it out to more people instead of emailing, and that's where the podcasting came from. Yeah. Or the blog talk radio. I think I started on blog. I don't remember. It's so long ago. I might have started on Blog Talk Radio, whatever, but it was still a podcast, which I need to get back to. But I want to give some attention to this channel for a little while longer. But with that, I'm going to exit now. I want to thank you all for tuning in, for being present, for your contributions always in the chats, your contributions to the ministry, those who have donated. Thank you so much. Those who are thinking about donating, thank you so much. Those who have donated a long time ago and just ain't even got it, thank you so much. Whatever. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I want to even thank those of you who have downloaded the free material. Thank you. Especially if you've downloaded it and then like shared it with somebody, or I'm just grateful that you're giving this ministry an opportunity to show value and bring value. Thank you. All right. So with that, I'm going to move to my next adventure for this Sabbath. And I will that all of you are strong, full of joy, at a place of peace and at a place of progression, moving up through your rungs and through your Sephirah. All right. Until such time, this is Chief Yuya, head of the ANU Nation. Odabo.